Hello everybody, my name is Jara and today I will be discussing some newborn reflexes. We have about 11 of them and I will try to demonstrate that as well, just so you have an idea on how these reflexes work and why do we need or why do we have these newborn reflexes. We do have this newborn reflexes when we just got out from the world because we don't have any control, or we have very limited control over our body, and these reflexes will help us to survive, and these are like our survival skills. You want to assess this as a healthcare provider. That way, if there's any underlying neurological issue for the baby, and that way we could be able to address that issue if any of these reflexes are not elicited. So the first reflex that I will be talking about is the blink reflex. So the blink reflex, as a nurse, if you're assessing this, you would need a flashlight or a any like a pen light or something like that. So this is my baby. So when we're doing this, you want to turn on your flashlight and then see if once you point it on their eye, the baby should be blinking, because it's a extreme amount of light that's coming through their eyes, so they should be blinking when you're doing this. So if the baby does not blink, it means there's something going on, so you would like to address that. Just make sure that you do it repeatedly, maybe a couple times. You don't want to blind the baby, but just try to make sure that the baby is blinking, or there's a rapid eye closure. And this for this blink reflex, it is very important because we are assessing the newborn's visual alertness. So for the next reflex is the rooting reflex. For that assessment, you would like to brush the cheek or the near of the mouth of the baby, and then when you're doing that, the baby will turn their head towards that direction and will open their mouth as if that there is some food source going on that area. So you would like to see if the baby is responding to this assessment. That way you know that the baby have that survival instinct, or that the baby is okay to be sucking or feeding, because usually when your mother is breastfeeding, as soon as you place your nipple towards the mouth or by the mouth of the baby will open and begin sucking. So that is their reflex, but usually this reflex goes away in about 6 weeks after birth. So our next reflex is the sucking reflex. So usually the sucking reflex, it's a little bit similar to the rooting reflex, but this one, if you put in your thumb or the baby's thumb, they would touch the mouth and then they would try to begin sucking. So when they do this, then they will try to suck their thumb. Usually this goes away in about 6 months after birth, but it is a very good reflex. That way they know when they're breastfeeding something in their mouth, they will try to begin to suck. So this is like a feeding mechanism, and it is also to have that instinct that there's a food source nearby, and they will try to begin sucking. So my next reflex is the extrusion reflex. So for this one, when we are trying to feed the baby anything that touches their anterior tongue, they will try to expel it out. So once you feed them something, this is about 4 months of age, and then once you feed them something, they will try to expel whatever's on their anterior tongue. This reflex is very important just to make sure that the baby is not ingesting anything that's poisonous or anything that's a bigger substance that would harm them. So that's kind of their reflex, to make sure that something that they're ingesting is safe to swallow. And that is also the reason why at around 6 months of age, we try to give them some solid food. That way they would practice this habit that some food are okay to eat, and you would introduce that solid food for them at around 6 months of age. So my next reflex is the palmar grasp reflex. most of you, when you're touching the baby, they would immediately you know, grasp on your finger. That's just exactly what the baby is trying to do. So this reflex, sometimes it's very strong for the baby. When they grasp you, when you try to hold their hand, they will try to grasp your finger, and then sometimes even if they're lying down, they would tend to get up because that reflex is very strong. So usually this palmar grasp reflex goes away from 6 weeks to 3 months. So for my next reflex, it's going to be the walk-in place reflex. So usually on this reflex, you're holding the baby and then you let them try to touch on a hard surface like a table. And then the baby will take an alternative step. So if their left foot was touched on a hard surface, their right foot will begin to step in forward as if they were walking. So this reflex usually goes away in about three months, because usually at that time they could hold their weight already. So until then, the baby will be doing this reflex, the walk in place reflex. There is also an alternative reflex. It's called the placing reflex. It's somewhat similar to this, but the difference is the way you elicit it. So the anterior leg will try to touch the edge of the table and then try to step up again, and then it's like the baby is going to step up onto the table. So that is one of the alternative reflex as well. So my next reflex is the tonic neck reflex. So usually it is also called the boxing reflex or the fencing reflex. It is called that way because of the position of the baby. So whenever the baby goes into the other side of their body, usually they extend their one arm towards the where they're pointing out their head, and then this one hand will be flexing just like this. So the baby is going to be facing to the right, and then the arm on the right will be extended, and then this arm will be flexed as if they're like in a fencing mode or boxing mode. So that's why it's called the fencing reflex. So usually in this reflex, they didn't really see any findings what's the reason behind it, but usually it's linked to their eye stimulation and handedness, and it usually disappears in about 8 to 12 weeks after birth. So for my next reflex, it will be the Moro reflex. So usually this is also called the drop method, and there are several ways to elicit this method, but usually when the nurse is lifting the baby, they will lift them up about 4 to 6 or 8 inches above their bed, and then they will try to drop them rapidly, and then the baby will respond to that by bilateral abduction of the arms, just like this, and then they will extend their forearms, and they will open completely their hands, just like this, but like that, and then they will try to gain back and put back their hands in the middle and curling their fingers as well. Usually it is also associated with startle reflex, but it's not really the same, because the startle reflex, it is elicited by movement or sound. And then my last reflex will be the Babinski reflex. So for this one, the nurse stroke their feet, the baby's feet, about inverted J. And then once you do that, the baby's feet will flare out just like that. And it is normal until 3rd month of age, and then it disappears later on. And then upon growing up, it's the opposite version of us, like adults. Once we do this method, we tend to curl. But for the newborns, when you do that inverted J, the feet will flare up. So thank you very much. That would be all for my 11 newborn reflexes.